Well, good morning, everybody. It's day 4 of the 2020 UPAA Digital Symposium. We're glad to have everybody out here today and another day of great speakers. Before we get rolling, I just wanted to have a couple quick announcements. First of all, the questions have been coming in fast and furious. I know you want to see the videos. We've started putting them up on the University Photog, which is our YouTube channel. We have 4 videos right now up, and a few more coming, but if you need to take a look at something you missed or share them, go ahead and do that. Also, again, here's today's schedule. We have Alison, Conklin right now, and then this afternoon, Carolyn Summers. I did mention the group photo is going to be happening after the second session. So everybody make sure you get nice and ready for that. There's a lot of pressure on this group photo, the Zoom group. So we'll do that after the second session today before our prizes. Once again, we just want to thank our corporate sponsors and all the wonderful things that they've helped us with. This is, as you can imagine, it's a hard time to ask for help, but they've been willing to support us and give us speakers, give us prizes to give out, and we're just so grateful. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Susan McSpadden.
Hey everybody, thanks for being here today. Happy Thursday. Hope everybody's enjoying this. Today we have Alison Conklin with us. Alison, thanks so much for being with us. We're so happy to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Let me just tell the group a little bit about you. Alison is a nationally acclaimed wedding editorial and food photographer based in the Philadelphia area. Her work has been featured in publications such as Martha Stewart Weddings, Brides Magazines, The Knot, and Glamour. She was named a Fujifilm X photographer in 2019, and Fuji is sponsoring her talk today. Alison and her husband and business partner, Jeff, live in the Philadelphia area and with their sons, Jonas and Moses. Besides being an incredible photographer, Alison has had several overwhelmingly significant experiences in her life that have shaped who she is and how she approaches her work. Alison, I'm going to read a quote from your website, which is really beautiful, by the way. Everybody needs to check that out. We'll put the link to that in the chat over here. The quote says, "I want my photographs to evoke feelings and offer anyone who sees them some connection to something within their hearts or something buried in their mind. I want my photographs to connect people to themselves and their lives in deeper ways." Will you tell us about that first life-changing experience and how photographs came to be so important to you?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in sort of both my parents were chemists, so they were really familiar with, like darkroom stuff. So they would do a lot of photography when I was a kid, and they would develop everything. So my whole life, my whole childhood was chronicled through photographs and Kodachrome and slides and all that stuff. But when I was 14, my mom suddenly passed away. And so I was put in charge of making like a memory wall, when somebody dies and you go through all the photos, right? This is way before Facebook and the internet. So I had like my dad handed me a big cardboard box of all of their negatives and slides and prints that they had made, and just like random photos. And I just kind of found this quiet little corner in my house and started going through them. And as I looked at them, they weren't like Sears portraits, they were more like outtakes and candids and just like funny things that my parents were into, and also what my mom would photograph. So I sort of got to see, or I did get to see, how powerful photography is, because I was looking at how she saw me, because a photograph is not only about the person or the subject, it's also about the person behind the camera and how they see the world. And that just sort of stuck with me, and I suddenly became obsessed with photography. I'm so grateful to have all of those memories and things that really just remind me of her. And so I started like bugging my dad. I'm an only child, so the joke is that my dad didn't know what to do with me because he was suddenly a single father of a teenage girl. So he built me a darkroom and taught me how to develop film and make prints. And so we would spend hours down there, and I would take my camera with me everywhere and photograph all kinds of things. And I did it in a way that felt important and honest to me, because I just knew that life changes so quickly. And in the moment, we sort of just take things for granted. And I suddenly realized that I shouldn't do that. I should be more mindful and intentional. And so I was that really nerdy girl in high school and yearbook, taking all the photos.
That's awesome. And I loved that you learned what we would now call the old-fashioned way with a manual camera and in the dark room. So your camera and your photography helped you navigate the loss of your mom, but then you started getting paid for your work. Tell us how you got into wedding photography and what you love about it.
Sure. So I was, really into yearbook and photographing all my friends. I did all their senior photos in high school. And when I was 18, someone I didn't know was looking for a wedding photographer, and they, I'm sure they didn't have a big budget or whatever. And somebody said, oh, my friend in high school takes lots of photos. And so they called me up and asked if I wanted to do it. I had never even been a guest at a wedding. So to say that I was terrified would be an understatement, but I was like, okay, sure. So to get ready for this, I actually dressed my friends up as a couple, and we ran through where the wedding was going to be. And I kind of practiced posing and all that stuff. But I shot that wedding as an 18-year-old who had never even been a guest at one. And what I found myself attracted to, because I'm coming into it, again, I didn't have blogs to look at or inspiration photos. I'm coming at it looking at what would be important to me 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And it was always those emotional moments, right? And that's just sort of what led me to kind of figure out what I was supposed to be doing. Because again, I really was all right, I'm going to do this, but have no playbook of how this should go. And I just sort of fell in love with all those honest moments. And so my photos looked a lot different than maybe what they should or supposed to look like, but the couple loved them. And that was 22 years ago, and they're still married and have a beautiful family. And so that's sort of how I jumped in. And
I think that's awesome that you are still in contact with that very first couple that you photographed.
Yes.
Have they asked you to photograph more things for them?
I've seen them a few times throughout their, the growth of their family and stuff. And it's awesome. And it's really fun because, I shot that with film, obviously, back in 1998. So it's been, I love the relationship of watching people go through these moments and then kind of keeping up with them. So I feel really fortunate.
I love the story that to prepare for that shoot, you dressed up with friends and ran through it. That's so great.
Yeah, she borrowed her mom's dress from the 70s or whatever, and everybody was really confused because these, we're 17, 18-year-olds running around. Congratulations. I don't know what to say to you, but yeah, it was fun.
So it sounds like you pretty instantly found your passion as a teenager. How did you go from shooting a friend of a friend's wedding to making that a business?
So I had never, I'd always dreamt wouldn't that be amazing to be a photographer, to be a professional artist, but that felt impossible, right? How does that happen? So I had a couple of desk jobs, and it's funny because I worked for Rodale, which was a big publisher back then. And what would happen was I would go through cubicle to cubicle photographing people's families and people's kids and people's weddings. So it was sort of I was doing this what I considered a real job, a 9-to-5 job, but I was just sort of falling and just shooting everybody's events. And then I would sort of just hit a point where I was life was too short. I had 2 kids at this point, and I was I'm just going to go for it. So it was 2002. I took an ad out on the Knot and was we'll see what happens. And I haven't had a real job since. I've been working for myself and shooting weddings.
That's fantastic. So after getting a decade or so under your belt and hitting your stride with marriage and parenting and figuring out this self-employed business thing, tell us what happened to make you feel the 3 words, "I can see," were the best 3 words ever.
So, you're obviously really busy. I'm running my own business. I have 2 young kids at the time, and I don't seem to like notice that I'm extra tired. I just figure this is normal. So I had just photographed my very first cookbook, which was a little bakery in Philadelphia, and I had worked on it the previous year, and it had finally gone to print, and we had this big party in Philly. And then the following day I woke up, to get it was like a random Tuesday to get my kids off to school, and I woke up and I couldn't see anything. Like, couldn't see anything. Literally, it was like rubbing my eyes, like, am I tired? I put my glasses on.
That's truly my biggest fear in life.
Right? I mean, especially when you base your career, I mean, I was terrified. It felt sort of like, people ask, was it just darkness? But it was more like I had maybe like 100 layers of saran wrap over my eyes. I couldn't, it was just kind of fuzzy. So I went to the emergency room, and a few tests later, I had a pretty big brain tumor sitting on my optic nerve, and was wheeled into emergency surgery and all of that stuff. But they were telling me, like, you might not get your sight back.
They put you straight into surgery after the diagnosis?
Yeah, it was like, and I was like, wait, don't I have like a second? Like, no, because like it had gotten so big that they were like, we can't guarantee even at this point that you'll get your sight back. They had done, I guess, like 3 previous surgeries like that week, and 2 of those people hadn't gotten their sight back. So it was sort of just that unknown. And it's funny, because what I really felt like was that I had 2 boys. I have 2 boys. And so I was taking photos of them all the time. So it just was, before I went into surgery, I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. Like, at least I knew that if something happened or whatever, they would always know how I saw them, because they would have all these photos, right? I mean, I'm annoying that I take photos of them all the time.
I'm assuming that you're at this point kind of having flashbacks to the experience that you went through as a child with your mom and the photographs that you had from her.
Right. I mean, and I think that's what's so powerful about photography in general, is the story that it tells, right? And like it's a moment, and it's about how you see it. And it's really special to the person that's taking it, because we could all be in the same room and have sort of the same scenario, but each one of us would have a different image, because we all see the world a little differently because of our experiences and our own stories. So I felt kind of confident, as one can feel in emergency surgery, but that was on my mind. And spoiler alert, I got my sight back.
Yes, we're grateful for that for you.
Yes, very lucky, very lucky.
How long was it before you could get behind the camera again after something major like that?
Yeah, so I had I was in the hospital for like a little over a week, came home for like 2 weeks, and then had to go back. So this happened in October. I did not go back to actually shooting a wedding until December. And I had to bring somebody to carry everything for me, because I couldn't lift anything heavy. But I just remember, like, yes, I still had some stitches. And yes, maybe like my life is completely altered, but I was so happy and so grateful. And it's just like just a real reminder of, everything might not be perfect, and it's certainly not the plan that you imagine for your life, but it's a really good reminder and blessing that, like, we're so lucky in like the simplest things. So I was so excited to be back to work, and like those photos are some of my favorite, probably just because of how emotional it was for me. But yeah, it was great.
Was that a first assignment back after surgery just so nerve-wracking, and were you so relieved to get to the end of it and know that you could still do it?
Definitely. I mean, I certainly felt, I had somebody kind of like doing all the heavy lifting for me that day. But yeah, I felt just so grateful that it all came together and all worked out. Yeah. And I remember being super happy. It was funny because I was thinking about that prior to this, like, what was that wedding? And I was just funny. And I look back and I'm like, those are some of my favorite images. And that's probably why, you know, because my emotion is attached to the photos just as much as like their emotion would be attached to their own day.
Well, now that we've heard quite a bit about how you connect to photography and why, and kind of the emotional aspect of the work that you do, let's see some of it. Show us your work and tell us some of the stories behind them.
Sure. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see that okay?
Looks good to me, Allison.
Okay, cool. I see some thumbs up. So this is my favorite moments. So what I love, I mean, I love so many things about a wedding, but what I love is on the top 3 list is the fact that you're in a room with everybody you love. And I think right now more than ever, we can really appreciate that, right? Because we're all sort of, you know, quarantined or, you know, have different scenarios. Maybe we haven't seen the people or friends in our family. So at weddings, to me, it was always really important. Just because like I don't know. I just think it's really special to have a room full of everybody, and then you have toasts, and they're usually pretty good. I mean, sometimes they're not so good, but usually pretty good. And this is a toast moment, you know, something embarrassing or something cute is being said. And that's obviously the bride and groom listening. And so that's like one of my favorite images, just from the pure joy of it. And like, I hope that when you see it, it makes you smile, because we can all sort of have a moment where we remember a good time. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So this is a couple seeing each other for the first time at their wedding. So this is just like all the nerves and excitement. And I just love that his eyes are closed and he's holding her so tight. And again, for me, photos should make you feel something. And I think so much about photography is allowing a space where people can feel natural, because nobody really likes to be in front of a camera. I mean, some people do, but the majority of my clients are not like, you know, super excited to have their photos taken. So I'm always trying to allow a space that makes people feel comfortable, and allows them to be themselves. So that's always my goal.
How do you develop that rapport with your clients to allow them to just let loose and be themselves and kind of forget that you're around?
I know, right? It's that give and take. I think that I think I do a lot of this without even realizing it, because I was kind of thinking about it when I asked a few of my friends, and I always keep a dialogue going, like during moments where it's appropriate to have dialogue, right? So that it doesn't feel like when I'm in moments where I shouldn't really be there, right? Where I'm sitting in the front of in front of a car, and the bride and her dad are sitting in the back. Like, I'm obviously like in the moment, but I'm trying to just be quiet. So I've sort of like built up a relationship where I'm just kind of like talking and keeping it easy, and really just trying to keep the focus on them. And then when there's moments where we're doing ceremony or just reception, like I don't want to be part of this at all. So I am definitely shooting with like a longer focal length and trying to stay out of it. I'm not doing anything super complicated with lighting, because I just don't want to take away from the moment. The day is not about the pictures are about the day, right? That famous line. And that's something that I really try to stick with. And it's even the same when I'm doing editorial work. I still want to capture who these people are, right? I don't want it to be like I think what's really important with photography is like, if you remember what your why is. So like you can get burnout or like feel in like a creative rut, but I'm always reminded, like, why do I even pick up a camera in the first place, right? I pick up a camera because I lost my mom, and it was a healing and really important memory for me to have all of these images. And I know that maybe not at this moment, but later they will look back and be like, wow, I remember that. I remember laughing and the way I felt, not like feeling uncomfortable. So like if I just remember my why, it kind of brings me back. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I love that. I think that's such a great reminder that sometimes when we get caught up in the stress of an assignment or of the moment, to just kind of take a breath and pull back and remind ourselves of why we're doing this.
Right. I mean, because we all have, you know, everybody's story is different. And why we fell in love with the art of photography is different for all of us. And I think just, you know, it's really important to remember why you even want to pick up a camera in the first place.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that you get some of the love that we're getting here on the chat. Andrew says, my life has been way too easy. Others have said, this is a very pretty photo, great black and white bride in the car shot. These images are so beautiful and pure, and their emotion and joy makes me want to shoot a wedding almost. Now that's a big compliment coming from university photographers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of people who say to me, like, I really hate wedding photography, but I like yours. And I'm like, I get that. I understand. Because I just don't want it to feel contrived in any way. And, you know, like the point A and point B are super important, but it's that middle point that gets us the story told. And I carry that with me whenever I'm doing food photography and editorial as well. I included some of those shots in here, so we'll get to those. And I love this photo. I love her freckles. But yeah, so I just think that that's really what I'm trying to achieve, is that you can look at it and have some sort of feeling, some sort of emotion. It's family stuff, right? I mean, that's very obvious that we're in a space and we're shooting portraits, right? But I still don't want it to feel like, hey, look at me, you know, or if I am doing it, hey, just look at me and smile. There's a little bit something more to it. But I'm always trying to capture connection. And again, that's in all avenues of my business, not just weddings and portraits.
Back to the wedding photography for just a second. Someone said they are shooting a wedding on Saturday, and this is great inspiration. Somebody wants to know, do you ever get drained by wedding photography?
I mean, I would be lying to you if I said no. So of course, because, I mean, it's essentially, I mean, you are being very social, making everyone feel comfortable, also worried about scenarios that are out of your control, right? Like, I don't know what the lighting is going to be like that day. It could be totally sunny. It could be totally cloudy. It could be raining. It could be snowing. There's so many things that I can't control. So absolutely, it is certainly like a really intense job to have. But I sort of love that problem solving on the moment. Like, I'm really good at, okay, something's wrong. I need to fix it now while looking calm. It's like, you know, that like craziness of like still putting that front on that everything's fine. I'm not nervous or freaking out at all.
Yeah, you have to be a duck. You have to be calm on top and kicking like crazy underneath.
Yeah. And I mean, I have sometimes, you know, we shoot like between 30 and 40 weddings a year. So absolutely, I'm going to hit like end of summer right before going into the crazy fall season. Like, oh my goodness, I'm exhausted. So to the question of like, do I ever get burnt out? Of course. But a few things that I've stopped doing. I don't really look at other wedding photographers' work. I find I'm like always, and I'm sure most people on this call, you're always sort of seeing stuff, right? You're driving your car, you're seeing a really beautiful doorway that's, you know, looks awesome. And you're like, if I was shooting somebody there, how would I pose that? Or like, what would I do? Or how would I approach that? That never gets turned off in my brain, which is good and bad. But I always keep inspiration going. And I'm looking at editorial and fashion and magazines and sort of just like finding inspiration from all kinds of places. I think if you're just saying, I'm a wedding photographer and I'm only going to look at wedding photos, that's a quick way to get really burnt out. So yeah, I hope that answers their question.
Yeah, I think that's a smart tip for everybody to not get tunnel vision about a specific type of photography. Look at other photography for inspiration.
Right. I mean, and I think that's really important, because if we're only saying like, I'm a food photographer only, and you only look at food photos, I mean, you could get inspired by something else or somebody else, and that could lead you to your next great photo, but you would have gotten there if you would have been like, I'm not looking at anything else that's not in my genre. So, and I love these kind of moments. This is right after they got married, and he was obviously emotional about it and adorable. And I'm sort of like standing back, just trying to like, again, not interrupt the scene, but capture like the spirit. And there's something about getting a great candid where everybody looks good, right? Because we have like the guy on the left, he's clapping and smiling. And so it's always, I'm always like, all right, it's not just a one person photo.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking, you know, how you capture those emotional and candid moments without interrupting the moment.
Well, okay, so just a little plug. I started with a mirrorless. I shoot the GFX medium format, and it is pretty much silent. And I noticed that when I started to shoot all my stuff with like a mirrorless camera system, and I didn't have that big sound of the shutter, it really changed a lot of things for me, because I don't want to be interrupting anything, because again, their wedding day is not about me. So that has helped. And then also I'm creating a space. It's all about like the space you're creating with your clients, like that feeling. And again, I really feel like it goes beyond just wedding photography. You know, like if you show up to a job and you are just like a ball of nerves and they can feel that off of you, I don't think it's going to go as well as if you're like, hey, right? So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think you definitely have to present a calm and a confidence to help the energy around you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to be calm, because if you're, and trust me when I say to you, there have been tons of moments in my life where weddings have gone awry and you're just like, okay, all right, this is great. We can figure this out. So this is my friend Dallas Shaw. She is a fashion illustrator. I photographed her book a few years ago, and we'll be starting on her second book once that is allowed. And we got to go up to the Empire State Building one morning at sunrise and do some photos for her. So I have some of these. It was like one of my favorite sessions with her. So you'll see her a lot in my slideshow.
Yeah, the light's fantastic, and I love all the shapes and patterns.
Thanks. Yeah, isn't that dress amazing? Yes. She was like, so it was like literally we had to be like at the Empire State Building at 4 a.m. or something ridiculous like that. She's like, I can't believe I'm showing up looking like this. She's like, I'm just gonna wear jeans. I was like, you cannot wear jeans. You have to wear this dress. Are you kidding? So
that's great.
Yeah. And even though she's looking directly at me, I feel like there's a little bit of a story there. You're intrigued, right? There's a little bit of an expression. That's what I'm hoping for anyway.
While we're on fashion photos, tell us kind of how you gained editorial clients.
Okay, so a big thing that I absolutely believe in your life and in the world is everything sort of happens because of the people that you know and how you treated them, right? So I was going along doing a lot of wedding photography, but sort of wanted to venture into editorial. With the cookbook, it sort of just happened because I knew a lot of people in the city in Philadelphia, and I had been shooting some food a little bit, but really not much. Same sort of scenario where I had shot a wedding and had like, you know, no other wedding experience. But it was with a big publisher, and I remember they were like, can you just send us some test shots? And I did. And I just sort of went through it. And because I did that cookbook and it worked out, that led me to meet other people. And eventually I did Liliana Vasquez's fashion book too. She's on like E now. She has a TV show, and Dallas's. It just sort of like, it's like a domino effect, right? So that's sort of how it happens. So, you know, like and I did another cookbook a couple years ago as well. So it's just like one of those things. I don't have any like magic answers, except that it's about the people you know and how you treat them.
For sure. So when you make connections with people, and you know that they're part of a big publishing company or something like that, do you kind of then find ways to subtly foster that so that they will give you a call when they need something?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I had gotten even looked at for the Brown Betty cookbook. That was the cookbook I did first, because I knew a stylist, and the stylist had a connection with the publisher. And so, you know, once, and it's every interaction, right? People are going to remember your interaction. So it was sort of like, hi, nice to meet you. I would really love this opportunity. I know I don't have any food photography in my portfolio, but I really feel like I could do this. And they take a chance. So, yeah.
We have a couple questions about these particular photos. Kristen wants to know if you're using ambient light here.
Yeah, this is all natural light. And again, it's really early in the morning, sunrise.
Was it a kind of a nice cloudy neutral day, or what did you have lighting wise?
I think it was kind of neutral. There is sun, because you can tell a little bit from the sun's coming in to her left. You know, it's rising. So it was like really early. I mean, that's when you want to get out there if you want some kind of like even magical light, is like right at sunrise. So when we pulled up to the Empire State Building, it was pitch black. When we got up to the top, we were starting to see the sunrise. And so it just created this like really magical light. It was like one of those days that was, I don't know, I'll always remember. It was really fun.
Nice. Christina asks, do you have go-to action prompts that you use when photographing? She asks about a couple, but I think it probably applies to anybody that you're photographing.
Sure. So with Fujifilm, they have those built-in film simulations. I keep mine on the soft, usually just like Provia, and I'm really using that. I noticed that since I switched systems, I'm not doing a whole lot of editing on the back end. If I am using something, it's anything through Develop. It's like DVLP, I think. Don't quote me on that, but if you look it up, you'll find it. And they've got a bunch. But honestly, like, I'm really not doing a whole lot. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of green. But what I love so much about Fujifilm is just the color science. Like, I'm not having to do a whole lot. And I don't want to sit in front of my computer. I don't love sitting in front of my computer and editing. So this is in Philly, underneath the bridge. Obviously, like during their portrait session, but I still want to keep it natural. And a big thing for me, if whoever's doing their wedding on Saturday, I think that it's important to have a lot of pictures where they're not kissing, right? Just because like there's a lot of connection that happens without that. That seems to be a go-to. So I'm trying to do something a little different.
That is a great tip for sure. I think that one's kind of one you think, oh my God, I have to get that, but not necessarily. There's so many other telling photos.
Right. So this is an actual bride with an incredible dress, and I just love this photo just because I think her dress is amazing. So I had to include it. Yeah, but you're not going to get this from every single client. But there's direction given. But I'm also keeping it loose because I don't want them to look back and be like, do you remember posing forever and being so uncomfortable?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, how do you kind of keep it going, and how do you, what clues do you get from your subjects that they're kind of over what you're trying to capture and you need to move on?
Right. I mean, I've always been a people watcher, so like body language is a really big thing. So I mean that's basically what photography is. When you're photographing people, you're people watching.
I call myself a professional people watcher.
There you go. So yeah, so you share it. Yes. So I'm kind of picking up cues from that. I am really in tune to other people's emotions. I think you kind of maybe have to be when you're in this profession. So
I think there's a fair amount of psychology that goes along with being a photographer.
Right. Absolutely. So like, again, it's like a social interaction where I'm I'm in a room with hundreds of people and I don't know anybody, and I'm trying to make everyone feel comfortable and also forget I'm there. But it's that challenge that I love. So this little girl's name is Fiona. So when she was born, I was like, we eventually will do a Fiona Apple. Child of the 90s, but that's what this was about. I just thought it was cute.
Somebody wants to know, and I don't know if you have something in what you're going to show us. Somebody has a question about family groups. What's your approach to stay away from the traditional line them up and shoot them group photo?
Right. So I don't think you can. But you don't have to spend a long time on it. I've been doing this for 22 years when I'm trying to get through weddings, because there is something very important about that. But I don't want to spend more than 20 minutes on it. So I'm really good at, like, I have teenagers now. So like, I'm very good at wrangling crowds and wrangling unruly people. So it's just sort of like, quickly get it done. I know it's not my favorite. It's probably my least favorite part of the day, but I also know it's important. But what's also really great about those moments is snap photos when they don't think you're looking at them. Because a lot of things happen where, like, maybe they're going to hold grandma's hand, or they're going to look over at their, because usually you'll do your family photos after they have walked down the aisle and gotten married. So that's how I started looking at it. Like, there's a lot of, sure, not my favorite situations, but there's a lot of little things and little moments that are just still going to tell the story and not feel so posed and kind of boring. So just sort of always have your camera ready.
I think as university photographers, we're often in the situation of having to do group photos, whether it be a group of the math department or a group of the basketball team or whatever. And I completely agree that kind of capturing the little moments that happen before they think the real picture is going to happen, or afterwards, are definitely where you get those fun little memorable things. Those probably for us as university photographers aren't the images that are going to get published. I hate to say it, but that's kind of the way it is. Is there any advice you have for still getting kind of that professional look, but not so stiff?
So I mean, when I'm shooting the group photos, like, I'm always keeping a dialogue. When I'm doing like a portrait thing, there's always a dialogue. I can sort of ramble on anything, but I'm also giving like little prompts. Oh, that looks great, right? So like, there's always just little prompts that you can give people, or you can say like, hey, look at each other for a second. I think that would be the best answer. I mean, there is no, for me, I don't have any magical kind of like making these things amazing, but I just think it's a lot about your demeanor. If you're yelling at everybody to like stand still and put their head up, they're going to be like, this is horrible. But if you're like, okay guys, haha, like, there's a lot of self-deprecating humor that I'm like saying all the time about myself to kind of get people to laugh. Like, there's something different about somebody looking at the camera and smiling and actually laughing. I'll say to people, hey, laugh at me for a second. Like, I'm so funny. And it works.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip. I think often people are kind of reacting to, or caught up in the thought of, oh my God, I'm about to get my photo taken and I don't like it and I don't feel comfortable. But if you can take their mind off of that and give them another focus, that probably helps.
Right, exactly. And I think I don't think I ever realized I was doing that. But the past few years when I've been thinking about it, because I get that question a lot, like, how do you have these scenarios? It's really just the situation that you're making. It's how you're making everybody feel. And also, if people feel good, you might not be the greatest photographer in the entire world, but if they had a really good time, and if they were like, that was actually fun, that's a huge win in how they're going to view their photos at the end. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think so too. Back to that last photo, Dean wants to know if there's a backstory to how the apples fell out of the truck.
So there is sort of a backstory. I wanted them everywhere, but they were sitting in the truck, and when they opened the door, because we thought it was cute if the door was open rather than just having the truck, the door closed, they sort of just like fell. So that was how that happened. And then like, she just picked one up and did that. And it was adorable. And
That's the great thing about kids. They'll just do the unexpected and it turns out great.
Yeah. Yes. And so you just always have to be ready for all that good stuff. Same thing when you're doing like, you know, the boring straight line, everybody look at me. It's always that little stuff, the hand holding and all that. Same, like, so this is a picture of her and her grandfather. It was requested, you know, on my list of photos I had to take. And when they didn't really realize that I was shooting them, like, look how cute his face is looking at her with his glasses down the bridge of his nose and like the dog. You know, I mean, I think that this is much more powerful to me than the picture where I have it, the picture of her looking at me and the picture of him looking at me. If this was my photo of my family, this would be the picture that'd be printed, not the standard. And so like, it's just like, always be ready. I mean, you can't, no one's perfect. You're going to miss things, but like, I think if you go into it, like, okay, let's make something great out of not our favorite time of day.
Do you find that you have to do a little bit of what I call client education? A lot of times clients think they know what they want, but then you do little moments like this, and then when they see them, they're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I like that so much better.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I've learned probably the hard way that like I still have to take all those shots that, you know, maybe don't excite me, but I'm going to put all of what I find important. And like, I'll take all the pictures that like maybe isn't going to mean anything to them right now, but I'm always conscious of where they are, like in a reception room. If they go over and talk to grandparents or aunts or anybody, I'm like, want to stay back so I don't interrupt, but I know that I want those shots where I'm looking at each other and talking and hopefully like a laugh or whatever it is. Because maybe not right now, that will be their important photo, but eventually, you know.
That kind of goes back to your experience with your mom, knowing that photos that you didn't think were important at the time because of life circumstances become important later.
Exactly. And that's my why, right? And that's the whole reason why I pick up a camera in the first place. And yeah, keeps me going.
Nice. If we were done with this interview, that would be the perfect wrap up, but we don't want to be done. We're loving it.
So this is that same wedding that I just showed. It was on the family property, and the little ring bearer jumped in the hot tub, like fully clothed. And I only saw it because I was like walking from the tent to sort of closer to this area. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I lit this with a video light. So obviously he knows I'm shooting it, but the reaction and the situation is completely real.
That's fantastic. There's several comments of people loving this photo. And since you brought up lighting, there was a question earlier about what percentage of the time do you go with just natural light versus how often do you light things?
So the majority of our weddings are in Philadelphia. So in Philadelphia, we have a lot of historical ballrooms that are very dark. So where I try to shoot natural light in those situations. In church, I don't shoot anything like with a flash. It's all natural light. I work out white balance and just make it happen. But reception is probably 75% shot with lighting. And most of the time it's going to be with an on-camera flash or video light. So like this scenario, I felt like I wasn't going to, he loved the attention, right? Like he's all about it. Like, oh, you're seeing me jump in here with my entire tux on. So I didn't feel like I was like stopping a real moment because he was eating it up. So yeah, but like, honestly, I just would prefer to shoot natural light most of the time because I just don't want it to be like a big flash or a big video light is going to kind of stop what's happening.
Courtney wants to know what video light you do use.
Great question. I can answer that. Hold on. It's nothing fancy.
You've got quite a few members that you've inspired to shoot weddings now.
Oh, I'm glad. I mean, I hope that I know, like, you guys aren't necessarily wedding photographers, but I do feel like you can take the idea of making people feel comfortable and like really trying to capture who someone is. I have some pictures later that was a campaign I did, and I really didn't want to take LinkedIn profile pictures. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for what I was doing. So anyway, I hope that it all works out. But it's just a genre, like nothing fancy. Just handheld, has some like temperature controls.
Do you have an assistant with you that helps out with that kind of thing?
Yep, my husband. So he used to shoot for the newspaper back in the day, and then we got married. And like I was like, oh, I have a little cough. I feel like you should come with me to this wedding. So I kind of pulled him over to the dark side. He used to shoot sports. So yeah.
We have a lot of former newspaper photographers in our group, so they can appreciate that.
All right. And I mean, I'm always about, I remember in high school when I would do photography, they'd be like, stop cutting people's heads off. Mm-hmm. But there's just something that can tell a story without seeing the whole picture. And
this goes back to you bringing up body language, and it made me think, you know, in this time that we're in of a global pandemic where we're having to wear masks and we have lost the facial expressions in some shoots that we now have to do that include social distance and face masks, it's made body language become so much more important than it ever was before.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So like for my client, someone was looking for those little gestures, right? Like her thumb tucked underneath his suit jacket and like the hand around her waist and just like the way their heads are tilted and the smiles. For me, I've photographed a few things. I did photograph one wedding during this and it's certainly a learning curve because I'm usually smiling and I'm giving like prompts. So it's certainly like, okay, I need to like figure out how to readjust and still get across that like everything's great and they're doing great when they can only see my eyes. So I think it's going to be, it's a little bit of a challenge, but I'm up for it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I just love obviously the detail in her dress, the flowers. I just think that you can tell a story and it doesn't have to include everything. This is Dallas again. So she needed some new headshots. I shot this in December or January. This one, if we're talking lighting, I had just the Profoto A1X on a tripod. Because when I tried to do it natural light, I was overexposing all the beautiful little dancing lights. And so I wouldn't have been able to do this if I didn't have light. So I just put a grid on that little flash and flashed it at her face kind of enough to light her up and kept that disco ball on the light to make all of the fun dancing little reflections and stuff.
That's beautiful. I love that idea.
Thanks. Yeah. And who doesn't carry a disco ball with them when they're wearing a sparkle?
Right.
I know I do.
It fits perfectly in the camera bag.
Yeah. Another picture of Dallas. The book that we shot together is in like the second little cubby from the left. Just sort of like, and this is actually natural light. There's a window that you can sort of see on the upper left.
Yeah, it's fantastic, perfect light.
Yeah, it honestly really worked out. And again, this is editorial, this is set up, but I still hope, like my goal is that you still get a sense of place, a sense of story, who Dallas is, and you kind of feel drawn in, is my hope. So, and she's an illustrator and artist, so.
Someone wants to know about the tree on the right. What is that, a Christmas tree or what's?
It is actually, so where we shot this was a photography studio that has a florist next door, and this is all dried flowers, like part of like an arbor she must have built for an event or a wedding, And we were like, hey, can we like borrow that and put it, because it needed something, right? If we didn't have all that texture going on, I don't know.
It balances out the composition too.
Yeah. So you're sort of just like finding fun things. Like, what props can I use?
This is a whole different topic that we haven't brought up yet, but Meg wants to know if you use an agent. She says she really hates talking pricing and believes that an agent would be able to get her a lot more money than she could on her own.
So yeah, I mean, don't you wish photography could just be about taking pretty pictures?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I feel like I wish I would have had more business sense. So I think an agent, I personally don't use an agent. But I think if you can get one, I feel like it's really great to have somebody, as long as you trust them, like fighting on your own behalf, because it is a very awkward conversation, because it comes into that balance of like, how do you know how much to charge and how much are you worth? And I think it's all artists, we're all sort of like, it's just uncomfortable in general, right? But I don't, but I think it could.
Do you kind of have set pricing for weddings, and then editorial assignments? Are those kind of more dependent on the factors that are involved, or?
Yes. So yeah, we have set like collections and packages for weddings, which go by what the couple might be looking for, and hours and albums and all that, engagement photos, all that stuff. But then editorial is case by case, really. I mean, you come up with like an hourly rate that you feel like is fair, and then you sort of build from there and figure out what the client needs and how they're going to be looking at the images and how they're using them. It's certainly my least favorite part of photography.
Yeah, everybody would probably agree with that.
Yeah, it's hard, but I also think that it takes a lot of time and a lot of skill, and let's face it, photography is not cheap in general, right? But there's a lot of, I put so much of myself into all of my clients. I really care about the end result and making sure that whatever, if it's a wedding or whatever it is, that they really have something that's going to be exactly what they hoped for and better.
Do you ever have to have that, again, that client education talk with prospective wedding clients of why wedding photography costs so much?
Yes. I mean, because that's the thing, there's so many wedding photographers and we all sort of range. And yeah, I certainly get questions about why I charge what I charge. It's definitely not my favorite topic, but I feel like I can defend it. I mean, you are walking into a situation again where you cannot control 90% of what's going to happen. You can have a plan, but it could totally be like, we've had weddings where there were two like St. Rita churches, and they took all of the guests to that church, and it wasn't really the church they were getting married at, so it put us behind by 2 hours, and then you're just sitting in a church waiting. So there's just so many things that can go wrong, and if you have somebody that's not used to those kinds of scenarios and like would panic under all that pressure, it's kind of important to make sure that you have somebody that's like, okay, we got this, let's make lemonade. So yeah, just a lot of little things, and knowing your worth is a big one.
Andrew wants to know how much time you put in with the couple before the wedding day.
So, I mean, most of my couples, we do engagement pictures, but not all. So we definitely have conversations. I always try to interact with them on Instagram or follow along with like what they're doing up to the wedding, you know, like their little showers and things like that. I'm definitely trying to create a relationship, but not like in a way that it feels very natural. So I'm definitely invested. I'm definitely invested in always trying to get to know them a little bit better. Because I always, like, when I go to a wedding, I look around and I'm like, what do I think they wanted this day to feel like, right? And I'm trying to capture what it feels like for them to be there, and what it feels like for their family and friends to be there. And that sort of really, I mean, it's people watching, and also like, again, I feel like I feel everybody's emotions. So I'm just just sort of like feeling all of that. Do I sound crazy? But yeah. I love this photo. I love a good black and white. Obviously, I used to shoot all black and white film, so a big part of my heart is there. And this is them just like walking up to where the reception will be. And again, it's just like a storytelling image, right? Because like what I think is important is like those in-between moments.
Somebody wants to know how you deliver the images in the end. Is it a digital package or albums or?
Sure. So they get a USB drive with all high-res files, and I also put everything on a gallery that they can download directly from that gallery. I also make little Instax prints. Fujifilm has these little Instax printers, and so I always think, and I always get like remarks back, you know, like a printout, like I would print out this photo on the screen and put on like a little Instax print and send it along. And I have this like little box that I've had designed, and I send these like cute little cards with like some of my favorite movie quotes. So, and then they can do albums.
Jessica wants to know if you have an average amount of images that you deliver.
Great question. So it truly depends on the wedding in terms of like how many things are happening and how many hours, but most of our weddings are about 10 hours, 10 to 12 hours. And I would say that they get anywhere between like 1,000 to 2,000, which sounds a lot, like a lot. And it is sort of a lot, but I'm also shooting a lot. And I have my husband who's also photographing. So there's two of us. So yeah, they get anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 delivered images by the end. So this is Dallas again. And again, it's an editorial shot that she needed, but I still kind of hope for an emotional reaction even when I'm doing editorial stuff. And kids. And I sort of wish I had this bedroom. Right?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I shot this through a garage door that was all glass, and I lit it from the behind her, so you can see like her hair sort of blown out a little bit, but with that A1X Pro Photo Flash. This is the dad and daughter on the way to the ceremony. So I'm up front, sort of like awkwardly turned, trying to not interrupt, but also like this is a really beautiful moment. You know, one that I feel like would be really special years to come.
We've got questions that are just flying in. I'm trying to keep up with them.
Sorry. I don't know if I'm like boring everybody. I'm like trying to go a little quicker, but yeah, you let me know.
I think it speaks a lot that we're getting so many questions and so many comments as we go along here. Jessica wants to know if you edit all of your images yourself.
I do. So I've definitely attempted and tried to have somebody else edit, and it never works. I always end up redoing it myself. So I do everything, which again speaks to why I fell in love with the Fujifilm system, because of the color science. And like so if we're shooting like 30 to 40 weddings a year, it's a lot of time that I'm sitting at my desk. And I'm really honestly not trying to do a whole lot to my images. I know that there's like so many like fads out there, but I feel like I want it to be timeless, because if we're looking back at this like 10 years or whatever it is, and you're gonna be like, oh, you got married during Instagram's phase, huh? Like all of your stuff looks crazy and your skin tones are totally off. Like I wanted to keep it classic. So it's not like I'm doing a whole lot of stuff, but yes, I do it on my own.
Several people really love the black and white.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I could shoot, I mean, I do love like, obviously, like beautiful color photographs, but there's, because I grew up doing black and white photography, that's sort of where my heart is.
Megan wants you to know that, that we're not bored at all. We're loving it.
Thank you.
April asks, what is your favorite thing about being a wedding photographer that is not photography related?
That's a really great question. I mean, I get to go to some really awesome things, and truly it warms my heart. I mean, it's going to sound so cliche, but I like really love watching people's love of each other, right? I mean, like, of course there's always drama and stories, and like my friends are always like, what happened this weekend? But what I love is, I mean, there's just so much, like the connection of people, which is really special to me, you know. And so I think it's just all of that, like all the things I get to see and all the people I get to meet. Yeah. Everyone asks if I get to eat the cake. I don't. So I can't say cake.
No, wedding cake is my favorite of all time.
Yeah.
I'd have a hard time not partaking of that.
So this is New Year's Eve. They shut down Broad Street in Philadelphia. Her dress was like crazy awesome and did this like beautiful sweepy thing. So, and again, this is me just telling them what to do, but I still love it.
Lindsay says your tones are incredible, and Robert says so many make perfect photos that lack emotion, but I think he's trying to say that, oh, he says you make beautiful emotional images.
Thank you. I mean, that's really what, I mean, you can get so caught up, and I think that's the really big thing, because sometimes I can beat myself up and be like, oh, I should really be doing this, like so-and-so does this. You can get caught up in all of that technical stuff. But like at the end of the day, is my client going to know that I had perfect light coming in from this angle, or, you know, whatever it is? No, I don't think so. They're going to notice the way he looked at her, right? Like, or the connection or the emotion, or like what it felt like to be in that moment. That's what they're going to remember. And I think that's a big part, because there's so many great things that we can like get and make, and like, oh, if we'll make the perfect photo, but it's always about how it feels and the story it tells.
Jeff Miller made some comments about exactly that. He said that it's obvious that your motivation of delivering that emotional connection is your selling point above all else. And he says, in talking with potential clients, have you found there are some personalities or goals that are not a good fit for your style and approach? And if so, how do you navigate that to either get the relationship to a win-win or accept that it's not a good match?
So yes, that has definitely happened. Where, you know, you have a client that's like, I'm going to give you all of the photos I want you to take. And like, they give you, like, ever since Pinterest came out, it seems like people are going to send me like a list of galleries of pictures they want me to like emulate. And I'm just sort of like, you know, there's certain things that you can show me that you like, but I'm honestly really in it to capture what it feels like to be there. And I'm not going to recreate an image that doesn't make any sense to their day. And I say that nicely and kindly. And if it doesn't seem to be a good fit, then I think we both sort of come to that conclusion. But luckily the work that, I mean, at this point, again, like it's different when you're first starting out, but at this point, people are going to be attracted to my work because this is what they're looking for. And it's not for everybody. Like maybe they want those like perfect, like really dramatic lighting and, you know, different style than mine. And that's great. That's why there's so many photographers. We're all different.
Glenn asks or says, sports photographers know when the action will happen. They study the game. Do you feel this applies to you and weddings?
Yes, that's a great question. And so true with sports photography. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly always listening. You know, I'm listening for like an outbreak of like crazy laughter, or watching, and I kind of know who the main players are at a wedding and sort of like keeping my eye on them. Again, we go back to the people watching idea, but yes, yeah. And that's really interesting about sports photography. I guess you really have to know the sport. I guess that's why my husband loves sports so much, and he used to shoot sport photography.
There's a lot of, I think the ability to anticipate helps make somebody a really good photographer if you have that ability to anticipate what's going to happen next.
Right. Yes, that is absolutely true. that and sort of like being in tune to other people's emotions is a big thing.
For sure. We've had several people ask about what's in your camera bag as far as lenses go. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I'm shooting the GFX system mostly, and I have the 110 2.0. That's what I shot this with, which you can tell from all the dreamy like bokeh. And I have the 45 that I use a lot as well. Like, so I'm like a 2-camera shooter, sometimes 3 if I feel crazy. And I have the 50 millimeter, the 63, the 120, which I have some pictures where I use that one for some portraits, and it's a really beautiful lens for portraits. And then my new favorite, which is unusual for me, but it's the 45 to 100 zoom. That picture of Dallas that I took with the disco ball, I took that with that. And I had never really been a zoom shooter before, but I tried that lens out and it blew me away. And then I also have the X Pro 3 that I can show you some pictures with that. And I usually keep a pretty wide, like 23 on that.
Nice. So we've kind of inundated you with some questions. We'll let you kind of get back to your show a little bit here.
Sure. So this is Kanan. He is a professional ballet dancer. I was shooting him for a magazine piece on him. So it was basically just him, just him and I in a dance studio. And I took a lot of pictures of him actually dancing, but this was like a moment where he didn't know that I was going to be shooting him, and I just sort of loved it. And then this as well. I mean, I'm sure he didn't think I was going to do a close-up of his hand, but like obviously their hands and their feet are so calloused and used from dancing, so I just felt like it was a great accompaniment to that whole series I did. So you'll see a few of my pictures. I did a bunch of my portraits with my friends with their kids eating pancakes at diners, and this is one of them, and I just think it's adorable. Everyone else thought we were totally crazy. I feel like half my life is like defending where I'm taking a photo. Sometimes, you don't know where the good light is, and then you're like, okay, can you hear my dog? Is it okay if I let them out really quickly? So half my life is like defending.
You have a horse.
I do. We have 2 Great Danes. It's defending where I'm taking photos because it doesn't make any sense, right? People are like, what do you mean you want us to stand next to this like trash can? I was like, I know, that's not in the photo, I promise. But like, it's just having the confidence to be like, there's really beautiful light in this really weird parking lot area, but please, can you go over there? And again, the people in the diner were like really confused.
I find that a lot. I'm sure other photographers can relate that, when you pick out an environment, you have your reasons for it that the client doesn't understand, and they kind of go, no, I don't know about that. And sometimes it's hard to talk them into letting you do it.
Right. It's like having you have to have a little bit of confidence to be like, because you're going to always have a client that's going to tell you how to do your job. Mm-hmm. And like, I hear that. Okay, yeah, we'll take it this. And then we're going to come back over here to this like random parking lot next to the trash can, and we're going to do a shot here because the light looks amazing. Give and take, and always with a smile. This is a toast, which are, again, one of my favorite moments of the day. There's obviously like a really beautiful toast. I love that you can see like she's starting to tear up, and the way that she has her hands wrapped around him. Sorry.
Speaking of tears, several people have asked how often you cry at weddings, and how do you recompose yourself to be able to see through the finder?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of moments where I definitely lose it. Happens a lot in vows. It happens a lot in moments where I think that maybe even my clients aren't emotional, but I'm seeing it from a perspective of like how beautiful this is, right? Like, and also because I'm a mom of 2 boys, I am identifying with parents, what it feels like for them. So I definitely am that person, and sometimes I just have tears rolling down my face, and sometimes I'm really lucky that the autofocus is so good because I can't really see because I'm crying. But yeah, this is more Dallas and that beautiful day that we had. So again, lots of like fun props to sort of tell a story. This is with the X Pro 3 and obviously set up, but I love the way that his hand is on her knee and they're holding hands, and that everybody should have a neon sign with their last name on it. This was a style shoot I did for a dress company. So Editorial.
I love how every image that you've shown us, every part of the composition is intentional and kind of plays into the image as a whole. There's no space within your images that doesn't say something or mean something or add some value to the overall image.
Thanks. Yeah, it's funny, I had like a photo teacher in high school when I was taking a class in a local art school who was like, never crop your photo, always crop in camera. And so I always hear that. I'm not doing a lot of like, I mean, unless I really need to. It's all in camera because I just don't want to spend a lot of time looking at them on a computer. This is in the top of Carnegie Hall in New York. Carnegie Hall is a wedding venue, and they wanted like some shots. So this is an editorial gig, but you know, had a wedding vibe, which was, you know, it's great. It's kind of my dream to have both. See, my dogs are interrupting. Hold on. Clementine, Ringo, come on. Go. Oh, thanks. Go, Clementine, go. You're fine. Sorry.
I think we all love how real this presentation is too, just how our lives are right now. Nick says those lockdown interruption moments are always entertaining.
Yeah. So again, this is on the top of Carnegie Hall, for Carnegie Hall. Okay, so this is a really special project that I did. I'd gone to the American Go Red for Women American Heart Association campaign last year, like their luncheon, and I, because my mom had died of a heart condition, and I actually was diagnosed with the same heart condition like a few months prior to her death. I was 13, and I was diagnosed in February of 1994. She died in July of 94. So the Go Red, you know, the American Heart Association is really important to me. So I had this idea, because at the time where I went to the luncheon, they had like a bunch of speakers, which is great, but you know, I'm always wanting to pull photography in, and I pitched them the idea of, can we take 12 stories, 12 heart stories, and can I take photos of these individuals? It ended up being 11 women and one man who had lost his wife to a heart episode. And so this is where I was talking about, where I didn't want them to look like LinkedIn photos. So like I knew that the backdrop was going to be red because it was for the American Heart Association. So it was definitely a goal to try to keep them emotional while still being like a studio portrait. And obviously you can tell from my work, I'm not necessarily a studio portrait photographer. So, but it was I'm really happy with how it came together. So yeah, so this is one of the women.
You might,
go ahead.
I don't know if you're going to get to it or not, but I'm often scared of what a designer is going to do to my image, but I feel like what the designer for the AHA did with these turned out really well.
Thanks. Yes, they did. The whole thing worked out really beautifully. And actually the luncheon was supposed to be in May, but it's going to be next week. So I'm really excited about it. And I hope it, you know, makes people aware, and also just is a moment where these women feel like their stories are told. So yeah, this is the first woman that I shot for it. She was the first person to show up. I had never met any of them. So like, you know, and there's just something about, I have tons of photos of her like laughing and smiling, but there's just something, I think she's adorable, and there's something about her expression that I loved. So anyway.
Can we, while you're showing these, go back to a few more questions that have come in?
Yes.
Somebody asked something that I kind of had on my list too. What percentage would you say of your business is weddings? And we hate to be a downer, but how much has your business been affected by the pandemic?
So I would say about 70% of my business is weddings, and the rest is editorial. So I'm really happy that I've diversified a little bit. Like if I was clearly just a wedding photographer, it would be tough. I mean, all of our weddings have been pushed back and canceled and moved to 2021. But I'm still, you know, once we were allowed, I moved into the next phase. I've been shooting editorial for like the local magazine that I shoot for every month, picked up some portrait gigs. So I think it's really important to, you know, you could say like, I'm specifically this type of photographer, but you never know. So it's always good to have a little bit of a diverse sort of background in like what you can do and what you can offer, just so that you can pivot a little bit. I mean, hopefully this never happens again, but I'm really grateful that I'm still able to shoot something.
Well, and the good news on the weddings too is you haven't lost that business, it's just gotten pushed.
Right. Yes, it's going to be a very busy 2021.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
And on the editorial shoots, Christina wants to know if you do your own styling and creative direction.
So most of the time, yes. The first cookbook that I did, there was an actual stylist. The second one was just me. And Dallas and I have worked together for so long, over a decade, that we sort of like work really well together. So we kind of plan things out and are a team. And then I have really talented friends who are like florists and stylists. And so it's always a collaboration. I could never say that I do all of this stuff on my own. That would be crazy. You know, I'm always like, hey, here's my crazy idea. How can we actually make this happen? So it's really good to have friends. And that's something that I'm learning, I mean, even more. It's always, I mean, so important. And being a photographer, I mean, normally it's a very lonely job in terms of a lot of time is spent with just me in front of the camera or in front of my computer, you know, so I'm like, don't really have coworkers necessarily. So it's really great to have other creatives that you can like ask questions to and bounce ideas off of. And
absolutely. That leads me to another question I had. So many of us as university photographers are kind of a one-person show. And with you being self-employed and kind of working on your own an awful lot too, what advice do you have for keeping yourself motivated and growing in your profession?
So I always have on my phone like a list of goals where I'm like, I really want to do these things. And so I'm always sort of like working towards something. And I think that's important, because otherwise you can feel like I'm always going to be doing the exact same thing for the rest of my life, right? Like, so having an idea, something that you aspire to, or like something you want to shoot, something that means something to you. Also having a good circle of friends and other creatives that you can like vent to, and hustling. I mean, like, you work for yourself, so you have to hustle, because like life is always changing and you never know the situation that you're going to be in. So it's, I mean, just have to keep going and remembering your why, which I sound like a broken record, but so much so when like, I'm like, I just can't, I don't know if I can do this again another Saturday, really. And then you're like, okay, why am I doing this in the first place? Right? I mean, there's a lot of pep talking.
Yes, for sure. Back to the Go Red for Women campaign.
Yeah.
Paul wants to know what type of strobes you used for that.
Okay, so I was renting out a friend's studio space. So I was using whatever he had, and I want to say they were like Goddix lighting, so I don't really have an actual answer on that, but they were nothing fancy or but I had a light, obviously a hair light behind them, and then I had a light to their left, or my left, kind of hitting them, so it was a 2-light setup.
Do you have the final product of this campaign handy, or is there someplace people can see it? We've got a couple of people who are interested in how it turned out.
Yes, I do. Let me just find it. So this is over 2 days because trying to coordinate everybody's schedules was impossible. So you see where I am. Day 1, I guess I was one of the people, lucky me. Day 1 was everybody to the left of me, and day 2 was everybody to the right. So it was just the 4 of us, and then we put the photos together. So what was really important was when I was shooting like these specific photos of just each person, I had tape down on the ground to figure out exactly where the lighting was, because we started the second day shooting this part of the photo. So the group shot was the last thing we did on these people's day. And then, does that make sense? So then I could merge them together because it's not the same day because we couldn't all get there. And we had to put them together. So again, this is like a group shot. It's certainly not my favorite, but I feel like everybody looks good.
It looks pretty seamless to me.
Yeah, thanks. So, everybody was like, oh, should we show up in a red dress? Because if you know the American Heart Association, the red dress is a big thing. But I was like, I will never wear a dress. So please don't feel like you have to. Just wear something red, even if it's just lipstick. So, yeah. And then, they went through, this is in a magazine, and told a little bit of the women's stories.
And so this just came out, right?
This came out in February, but there was supposed to be like a release party in May, but with everything going on, that was obviously pushed, and now it's going to be a virtual, kind of like your event. It'll be a virtual event next week. And Fujifilm was so gracious to print all of these for me. So they were originally going to hang at the luncheon we were going to have, but now they're going to hang in a hospital, which I kind of love, because there's a lot to know about women's heart health. And there's me, my husband took that photo. But then this one was so sweet of Trevor and his sons. He had lost his wife. So I wanted to have that part of the story because it's a big part of my story.
So Alison, I know when we talked over email, you said we don't need to go into detail about this, but talking about this project and showing your photo, your scar is very evident. So can you just briefly explain your other connection to the American Heart Association?
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, I was diagnosed with the same heart disease that killed my mom like a few months prior to her dying. And so like as a 13-year-old diagnosed with the heart disease and then having your mom die of the exact same thing, it was a lot. I went through a lot of tests and other surgeries growing up, which was another reason why photography was so important, because it would take me out of not only the grief of losing my mom, but also trying to navigate the idea of heart disease. Yeah, I don't know where to go with that. So a few years ago, 2018, I had open heart surgery at Tufts in Boston. So that's why I have this big scar. And I used to feel really self-conscious about it. And then I went to that Go Red for Women camp lunch last year, and I was in a room full of everybody else who had scars like mine and stories like mine. And I was like, there's something so beautiful about collectively being in a room of people who like understand. And that's why I was like, I called the director. I was like, hey, I have this crazy idea. Would you let me take over the campaign next year? And, I wasn't like, not that I wasn't professional, but it was sort of like a rambling voicemail of like, this is my idea and I would really love to implement it. And do you think I could take this and go with it? And they called me back and they were like, sure. And I'm really proud of it. I hope that even if one person reads it and doesn't feel alone in whatever sort of struggle or scenario they might be in, then to me, it's worth it.
Your presence and your transparency and just your emotional connection to what you do is so appreciated by our group. You're just clearly a very, I don't know, just a very special person. You're making a lot of people cry over here.
Thanks.
People are saying you have a beautiful smile and you clearly love life and they love your story. And, you know, in our email conversations back and forth, you said you're an open book, and we so appreciate that. I think sometimes we get caught up in what we do and how we do it, and not who we are and what we are and why we are. So thank you so much for just sharing so much of yourself.
Oh, thank you. You're gonna make me cry, but no, I'm honored to be here. So I'm glad that you all are enjoying it.
To kind of bring things back up a little bit, so many people loved your dogs in the background, and that kind of brings me around to your project that you've been doing during this lockdown time, this pandemic time. Can you share the dog photos that we love?
Yes, so I'm sure like most of you, the first few weeks of all of this were really scary. And so I was finding myself doing nothing but scrolling on my phone or watching the news, and I was like, I can't do this. And suddenly like I don't have anything to photograph. So my husband and I were like, let's come up with something to do every day. So we were like, we know that, so we have 2 Great Danes, and Ringo is the one on the right. He loves to wear clothes. And we were like, let's just take a picture of Ringo every day and post it. It's not going to be the greatest photo we've ever taken, but there's going to be that, like, it makes us laugh. Like, we would be laughing. And there was also, like, I painted this picture and, like, had to think about and curate sort of the ideas that were going to go along with what Ringo was going to be doing that day. So it, like, took a lot of the attention off. And it's the same thing I did with when my mom died and, like, working through grief. It was, like, figuring out, like, how can I start to heal, or like just start to like work through all of this fear and anxiety that we're all collectively feeling. And so it was great, and we had the best time. We did like 90 portraits. I think we stopped when we got to the yellow phase. We were like, okay. We had a lot of fun, and most of the times my husband and I were cracking up. And like, honestly, it took 5 minutes. We would put whatever scenario together and then dress them up. I would quick shoot it. I did everything with the X100V, and just like really quickly, easy, simple, like, and he honestly loved it. And he knew that like he would go over to the corner and like sit there, and yeah. I feel like maybe I lost my mind a little bit, but like only in the best way.
These are fantastic. How much direction did you have to give the dogs?
Not much. I mean, like, so Clementine only made it to that one photo because she does not like to sit, but Ringo loves the attention. So, and I would spend my days like painting pyramids and like making crazy things.
Did your sons get involved at all with
We borrowed a few of their clothes, and like that one with the record player, that was my son's, like all of his records and stuff. And we certainly would like pitch ideas, and like we had no idea what a Visco girl was. I don't even think I know now, but like apparently this is a Visco girl. So like there were certainly things where I was like, can you define what this is for me? And it just like got my mind out of it. And I think that's just like why I fell in love with photography, right? Like I'm an artist. I need to be creating something, and I need a distraction from what's actually going on.
These are fantastic. Everybody loves them.
Thanks. I paper mache'd a cactus. I know it looks a lot like Gumby, but it keeps me busy. I'm fully owning that it doesn't really look like a cactus.
When one of the dogs barked in their background, somebody said they know that you're talking about him.
Yes, for sure. I mean, he loved the attention, so it was really fun. And my Where's Waldo one is my favorite one. So
fantastic. Now, how'd you get that background?
I just photoshopped it. yeah, I just like cut him out and cut the wall out, and found that on like somewhere on the internet.
Well, Alison, you've made us laugh, you've made us cry. Everybody has loved this so much. Just one last question for you before we wrap things up here. Has the stay-at-home time and the forced slowdown of life brought any additional insights or clarity to how you want to approach your work from now on?
I mean, absolutely. Of course, it's always a reminder of how important being with other people is. And I really hope with like weddings, the focus can be more on how lucky we are to be in a room with everybody we love and appreciate. So I'm hoping there's more of a push for that rather than like having the most extravagant flowers or, you know, like it's just truly about being around each other and celebrating all the little things. And I think that's also another thing is like remembering just to celebrate every single day, because honestly, we don't know. And, you know, even the mundane days, I'll take them. I love it. Like so grateful. So I think it's just a really good reminder of what's important.
That's so true. Absolutely true. The thing that I've loved an awful lot about this time, although, you know, I don't love the reason behind it, but I love that it's forced us to slow down and, you know, really take time to remember those things and to appreciate the small things. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited and grateful to be here. So
I know I didn't get to everybody's questions, but I'm sure, Alison, you're easy to reach. And if anybody wants to reach out to you for other questions or comments, are they welcome to do that?
Yes, please. Instagram me, email me, whatever. I'm so happy to hear from anybody and would love to answer any questions or just hear about what you want to do and projects you might have going on.
Fantastic. Well, we all wish you the best, and we thank you so much for your time and for your willingness to sit with us today. I'm going to let Jaren take back over the screen and share with us information that we need to know about the rest of the day.
Well, Alison and Susan, thank you so much. I think we appreciate the reminder of why we love photography. You know, and that's what's so fun about this presentation. So we're going to go ahead and share screen again. We have a few prizes to give away. Okay. You guys all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, again, we want to thank Fujifilm for providing Alison as our speaker this morning. We're so grateful for them and for their continued support. We have a bag to give away. We have a Think Tank Photocross 13 bag, and the winner of that bag will be Christina Frent. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your last name. Christina F. You won a Think Tank Photocross 13 bag. We have a couple more swag bags. I know these are hot items, especially these water bottles, which are really cool, and they're going to be limited edition water bottles. Alison has one, and she's got it. Don't put it on eBay. I'm going to watch. That bag is going to go to Carla Waymeyer, a swag bag. And then we have maybe even more coveted, the BYU Mint Truffles. These are, if you need anything from Glenn Carpenter, this is the way to get it done. Our first winner of a shirt and mint truffles is Jeffrey Fitlow. And we have one more, Don Van Hall. We're going to send all those off to you guys in the mail, and just a little piece of BYU and UVU for you guys. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to go ahead and end this session, and we'll see you guys at the top of the hour.
Thanks to Jay and Jaren and the team for keeping everything moving so smoothly in this virtual world we're in, and for fielding the questions and all. And thanks to everyone for participating. It was really fun.